Welcome everyone to the August 29th Kubernetes community meeting. This is a community meeting that's live streamed and will be posted publicly on YouTube. So please be mindful that what you say is recorded. We also have a code of conduct, so please be excellent to each other. I'm Dawn Foster. I work at Pivotal on our open source Kubernetes contributors strategy. And I participate as part of the contributor experience SIG, and I will be your host for the day. And I will remind everyone to please mute when you're not talking as a courtesy to the rest of us, because this tends to be a rather large meeting. And with that, I think we have the administrative stuff out of the way, with one exception. So is there somebody who would like to volunteer to be a note taker? Anyone want to take notes? It's all kinds of fun, I promise. If somebody that doesn't volunteer to take notes, I'll just stand here awkwardly and keep asking until someone does, which is just going to be super awkward. It's going to be the worst meeting ever. Seriously, no one wants to take notes? Seriously, it's fun. It is fun. I promise. I'm going to start nominating people that I recognize. Or the people that are laughing at me, Stephen. Okay, Stephen's taking notes.
I've got a presentation.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. You're doing 6 p.m. Well done. Anybody else? All right, fine. No notes for this meeting.
I'll step in. I got it.
Thanks so much. Okay, with that, I think we're going to rearrange things on the agenda a bit because we're having a technical difficulty with Lucas with his demo. So Lachlan, do you mind giving your update, the release updates first, and then we'll do the demo second? Is that all right?
That is okay, Dawn. Hello, can everybody hear me okay? Fantastic. Okay, my name is Lachlan Evenson. I'm the 1.16 release lead. A few release updates for the week. So in 1.16 specifically, some milestones for this week today, which is August 29th, is code freeze. So if you are working on any enhancements and have pull requests in the Kubernetes repository, please make sure they are appropriately labeled and put in the queue. Hey, Joe. There is a large backlog in the queue that we're trying to garner, so make sure they're in the right state so that we can get them in and you do not get frozen out of the release. Also, those enhancements must be documented need to have the PRs for the docs ready for review on Tuesday, September 3rd, that's next Tuesday, and September 4th, next Wednesday, we're cutting the second beta release of 1.16. So they are the main updates for the 1.16 release, which is upcoming. As for supported releases that are out available at the moment, we do not have, everything is TBD on the next patch release. So there is no change since last week. All the patch releases are the same as they were last week. And if you're interested in getting this information hot off the press, feel free to subscribe to the Kubernetes Dev mailing list where you can see that. And I've also placed the links for the release schedule for all supported Kubernetes releases in the agenda. With that, I will pass it back to Dawn. If there's any questions, I will be available on chat to answer them. And thank you, Dawn.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think we've sorted out the technical difficulties, and next up is Lucas with a Weave Ignite demo. I think you might be on mute.
Now works?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Good.
Yeah, cool. Okay, sorry. Hi, I'm Lucas. I've been a C+ lifecycle lead for a couple of years up until now. I'm going to university actually next week. This summer I've been working with a friend of mine on a project called Weave Ignite. We're gonna do next. Yes, thanks. So the problem with the slides was that George is sharing my screen. Cool. So I was in the military with a couple of well, we in Finland we have Finnish mandatory conscription, and at the end of military we had been doing some really interesting stuff, and I got an idea of how to simplify the Firecracker user experience, which led to this Weave Ignite project. And the 10th of July, here before, we announced it. Yes, and next. Thanks. So unfortunately, due to, well, the technical problems, I won't be able to do the demo because of Zoom on Linux. Didn't really work today, sorry. But anyways, Weave Ignite is an open source virtual machine manager with container user experience and built-in GitOps management, the one-line sentence. What this actually means is that we take the container experience and what we learned from what is good with containers and try to go a layer down, so to say, and do virtual machines with this. And we utilize Firecracker, which is insanely fast. It can boot in 1 or 8 fraction of a second. So getting that kind of speed and minimalistic design is really key to this project. But also taking some things we learned about the container. For example, the Docker UX is really good for developing and user-friendly. And then combining this with GitOps for production readiness too, and being able to declaratively manage VMs. So yeah, that's it. Next. Cool. So as I said, we started with this in military, and then we we had totally different projects there, but we did Firecracker, and that gave this idea. And I mean, our case was we needed to use open source. We didn't have any like VM licenses from like VMware or Microsoft or similar, and QEMU/libvirt didn't work for us due to the networking setup. And we also had we needed to run special applications with kind of special requirements. For example, special kernel versions and that kind of stuff. But also we needed to integrate with the container world because we were running a couple of container workloads too. Cool. So we started looking into Firecracker, and I mean we thought this was really impressive tech, but it took us a pretty long time to understand how we could actually use it for something other than the hello world thing. And there was a lot of manual work. I mean, what we had in the military to get VMs running was a 500-line bash script, kind of. But now upon leaving, we formalized this as a clean room implementation to something written in Golang and then called Weave Ignite. So if you're not a KVM developer, this will help you use Firecracker in a friendly way. Cool. And yeah, so what's different between containers and VMs conceptually is that with containers we use, well, on Linux, C groups and namespaces mainly to isolate one workload from the other. And this then, well, by design, shares the same kernel and has a lot of good things. Things with that, with regards to bin packing and that kind of stuff, we all know from Kubernetes is very great. But in some cases, you actually need to, like in our case, we needed stuff with special kernels and also very tricky networking requirements. So that's why we needed virtualization, and that's why you also might need virtualization. Virtualization, on the other hand, runs one kernel per, or at least with Firecracker, you run one kernel per VM that is started, and hence the different applications don't share the same kernel space, and hence can be more secure than otherwise. Cool. And Firecracker uses KVM for performing the actual virtualization here. Next one. Cool. So with Weave Ignite, what are the different user stories where you can get out of it? Well, booting VM in less than a second is one, and one very key. Because if you can, with Firecracker, boot extremely fast, like 125 milliseconds or so for booting a Linux kernel. Add a couple of milliseconds to boot like systemd or something OpenRC to that, and then a couple of more milliseconds for doing the convert, like starting the image. And you end up in like getting the VM up really fast. And what's key about Ignite, as I said, is that it really combines everything we learned from containers with VMs. So, for example, container networking is handled seamlessly. It integrates with CNI. It integrates with Docker and or Prometheus. Docker and or Containerd. Also, Prometheus integrations are in there. And then the key thing is to be able to manage a fleet declaratively of these through checking in files, VM specifications, actually using the Kubernetes API machinery in Git. And if I have now the possibility to boot a lot of different VMs in like just less than a second, I can run a lot of VMs locally on my machine. For example, running Kubernetes, testing Kubernetes clusters without having to do Docker in Docker stuff like with Kind, which works pretty well, but has obviously technical limitations too. Next one. One too much, I think. Yes, there we go. So there are, at the moment, two ways to use Ignite, imperatively or declaratively. So if you use Ignite imperatively, you can use the CLI, which has the same UX as Docker. So it has Docker run, Docker PS, Ignite run, Ignite PS, Ignite logs, attach images, and kill exec, all of those. But also, you can use it declaratively using a specification that looks like a CRD or like a normal Kubernetes API object because it reuses the API machinery. And in the future, through the Kubernetes API too, and virtual kubelet. Yes, and so we reuse OCI in a way that so we can instead of like normally when running VMs, you have different formats for each provider. So you have VDI or VMDX or like something else. I don't know all of them. QCOW, for example, for QEMU. But we think that the container format, OCI specification, which was created and donated by Docker to the OCI Foundation, can be reused to many other things too. So we use an OCI image pushed to a registry, to Docker Hub, for example, as a way of distributing image content. And we also use like an actual container runtime to isolate the Firecracker process. So that's what I said about Containerd or Docker, is that we actually run the Firecracker process itself in a container for using integrating with CNI, but also for isolating the thing. I mean, containers prove to be a very good way to isolate stuff. Next. So I think actually, can you take a couple of ones back to the demo? I think that was skipped. I'm sorry. One more. Yes, there we go. So this is just a small. I don't know if you can see that. I had hoped to do the demo on my laptop. Anyways, you see that you run ignite run, and then give it a Docker image or OCI image. In this case, WeWorks Ignite Ubuntu, which is just Doc Ubuntu from Docker Hub, and with systemd added basically, and as an SSH daemon. Then you can specify CPUs, memory, that kind of stuff. Then PS images, kernels, do logs, and also Ignite SSH is there. Okay, then you can take forward to the building EM with VM images. And so, yeah, there we go. So with this, you can see that you just do from Ubuntu, add systemd, add because systemd, because if you're on a VM, you need to have some kind of init system running, something that can be PID1 and supports that, which is different from containers, where for example, your application like Nginx can be PID1. Yep, and finally, the pretty much last slide I had. So yes, what we aim to use this for is, for legacy applications, and if you need these kind of apps with special requirements, running normal VMs is a very good way, but especially for testing CI and running Kubernetes itself. So where we have plans to integrate with Kind, so that instead of running Docker containers for per kubelet, we can actually put the kubelet in a real VM through Ignite with pretty much the identical UX of Kind, and now have real VMs. This only works on Linux, obviously, because it uses KVM. But also that we have a kubeadm HA sample guide, so you run 3 VMs, and then from there you can do kubeadm init, kubeadm join. Footloose, another WeWorks project, is you can think of Docker Compose for Docker. Footloose is to Ignite, so you can run a couple of many different Ignite VMs or other container machines. And then lastly, cluster API integrations we're looking. So now last slide. We have documentation on ignite.readthedocs.org. You can check out the project. It's at github.com, WeWorks/ignite. We're always happy to receive contributions. It's fully open source. Just go and get it, use it, break it, give feedback. And yeah, any questions?
I think there's one question in the chat. Jason de Tiberius asked, sorry, and when we stopped sharing, my chat disappeared. Why virtual kubelet versus CRI integration?
Yes, so the virtual kubelet integration, where we're thinking that you could register an Ignite. So you run Ignite on a physical machine, and then register that as a virtual kubelet. And now every time you run a pod assigned to this virtual kubelet, which is then Ignite, it will run it as a real VM. So the content of that container image you specify, it will run that as a real VM. But the CRI way, we also considered, but the problem is that, we thought that the virtual kubelet way might be a bit more intuitive. And when using the CRI, we have to be compatible on that kind of layer that well, it's a bit harder, and also maybe not as user friendly or like clear to the user what happens as compared to using a CRD and then the virtual kubelet instance. But I mean, we haven't done all of that yet, so would be happy to get other feedback too.
Thanks. I think we have time for one more question, and Josh Burkus has a question.
Yeah. I noticed two differences between this and Kata containers and Kubevert.
Yes.
Which were the GitOps and actually having a sort of Docker build file for VMs. What are the other differences?
Right. So yeah, the difference between Kubevert and Kata, or let's say first the difference between Ignite and Kubevert is that Kubevert requires Kubernetes to run. I mean, it's built on top, but we needed something to also run Kubernetes. Hence, we couldn't like have the dependency on Kubernetes itself, but chose to use the Git. Basically, use check-in stuff to Git as our Kubernetes API server when we don't have a Kubernetes API server. So that's a difference between Ignite and Kubevert, and that Kubevert uses like these VDI, VMDK, whatever QCOW formats, and we use pure OCI images. So it's like it's not a Docker-like file; it's a Docker file exactly. You push and pull that content to Docker Hub, like whatever, and it's just a OCI image with SBIN in it. Need to be there, and the difference between Ignite and Kata is that Kata is running containers. I mean, its compatibility matrix is geared towards running a container, which means that using Kata, you can get isolation around your Nginx app, but the Nginx app is still running as PID1 inside of that container. With Ignite, your effective the unit is VMs. So you're running in the VM when it starts up. It runs the kernel, it runs SBIN in it, and then you can't like run Nginx as your first thing. That is so it's like fundamentally two different things. Ignite gives you real VMs, whereas Kata wraps a container with an extra shell that is a VM. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Lucas. Thank you so much for the demo. I think we're going to go ahead and move into the SIG updates, starting with SIG architecture. Do we have Tim's on the line? I don't see him in the list of participants.
I'll go snag him if you want to.
Okay, let's go SIG PM. Steven, you're up.
Hey, friends. Give me a second. See my screen okay? Yes, no, maybe so.
Yes, looks good.
Okay, cool. All right, so SIG PM update. This will be a quick one. I like quick ones for the community updates. So what's happened recently? We've had some chair changes. So Ihor has moved to emeritus chair for SIG PM. So thank you, Ihor, for all your work. And we've also added Locke. So that happened right after KubeCon, I think, maybe a little less than a month after KubeCon. So on the KEP side, there has been some work to do KEP metadata validation. So thank you, Chekha. This is kind of a big deal because one of the things blocking being able to put up a KEP website was making sure that all of the metadata was valid. So Chuck also wanted to view KEPs on the command line, so he wrote a tool for that. And part of that tool was a metadata validator. So we've brought that into the enhancements repo recently. Tim Allclair worked on a table of table of contents validation. So now keps are now the pre-submits will scream at you on enhancements if you have an incorrect table of contents, which is again good for the overall metadata for the website. And kept website, right? So this is still in progress, but I was talking with Brian Lyles during KubeCon, and he was like, "We should just do this. I'm going to hack on it." And after KubeCon, so by the way, chair for KubeCon, the weekend of, as he was flying back, he hacked on this, and so we've got a lot of content there. The next piece is to migrate that into to Kubernetes SIGs, I guess, and then start standing up that website. There are still a few things to do to make sure it's netlifiable or some such, whatever framework we have for standing up websites, plug it into that. So some things we still need to work on. I think between the summer and cons happening, it's been more of a quiet quarter for SIGPM. But things that we want to get to you are the KEP 1 sheet or KEP 101 for the community. Do a KEP retrospective. I think the KEP retrospective gets trickier every time because it's kind of something that you need to schedule as a cycle is ending or right as a cycle is beginning. So I think we haven't gotten the timing down, but that's still something that we want to do. Getting a KEP office hours in place. Maybe this is not something that happens. Maybe this is something that happens during the SIGPM meeting. Maybe it's a separate meeting. Still kind of noodling on that. Keep pushing on adding KEP reviewers. So I see that SIGs have started to do this. Your KEP reviewers do not necessarily need to just be your chairs and technical leads. If you have people in your SIG that are qualified to review and approve architectural documentation and decisions for your SIG, please consider adding them to KEP reviewers. So that's Kubernetes enhancements, KEPs, and then your SIGs folder and the owner's files within those folders. So if you have additional reviewers, approvers for your KEPs, please add them. There are, I want to say at this point, probably 150 plus open PRs for KEPs, which is massive, too many. There's still a lot of KEP churn. This would be easier if we had more people able to review those. So please. I know I said it already, but please add more reviewers and approvers for your KEPs. And then finally, we want to start to wind down the KK, the non-KK targeted Kubernetes enhancement issues. So there are a few things that are open. Some of them actually are KEP improvement issues, but some of the enhancements open are targeting improvements for non-KK repos. So in that case, we want to kind of shift those out of Kubernetes enhancements. Those are enhancements for non-Kubernetes projects can be handled within the project. So some aspirations for next cycle. I want to do a lot more grooming of the open SIGPM issues. What I'm noticing is probably 75% of those are assigned to me right now, and that shouldn't be the case. So starting to divest from some of those issues and making sure that we can pass them off to interested contributors. Just making sure that they have the right content in them first. Standing up the KEP website for realsies. We've talked about this for a little bit, but I think we finally have all of the pieces in place and people interested in doing this to make that happen next cycle. Issue triage is something that we want to improve on. If you have had the opportunity to read the Tim Hawkins "Deadlines Are Horrible" email and the resulting thread from that, one of the big issues that we're running into is how do we triage the issues and PRs that are coming into Kubernetes, right? So if you check out those links, and the slide deck is in the meeting notes, if you check out those links, there's some discussion about the workflow, the potential proposed workflow, and some additional labels that we can add. In fact, really quickly. No, kill Slack. Why? Okay. So you can see we're talking about like what the workflow for this looks like potentially, and also some of the like what the state machine for issues coming in and out of Kubernetes. So check some of that out. This needs to still be cleaned up a little bit and more discussion has to happen, but this issue is very meaty, and I think it warrants some larger discussion since we're talking about changing process for multiple SIGs. Essentially, this would be a project-wide change. So, and then finally, the project board improvements. There was an open PR, or there is an open PR around writing a Proud plugin that can do some fancy things like add issues and PRs to project boards automatically. This is one of my probably largest complaints that we don't have that functionality out of the box. So Prow is, so someone's been working on a Prow plugin. I want to see where that's at in the next few weeks and see if we can keep carrying that work forward. There's also the project bot, which I think is a pro bot plugin or something. I was chatting with Gwen about it a little bit, and we want to see which route is the right route. Ideally, we could get something native on GitHub. If not, of course, we've been known to write things ourselves. So doing some investigation over that over the next quarter. And if you want to reach us, this is who we are. The chairs are Caleb at Pivotal, Jace at Google, Lockie at Microsoft, and myself at VMware. If you want to reach us, it's git.cates.io/community, SIGPM. Our Slack channel is SIGPM, and our mailing list is Kubernetes SIGPM. Thank you, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Stephen. Sadly, the SIG architecture update is canceled due to some technical difficulties on DIM's end. So we're going to punt that and do that one in a future meeting. So with that, I think we'll move. So Josh has a question.
Yeah, I haven't seen you discuss the rationale for not allowing any keps from anything that is not specifically in Kubernetes. And
no, so that was, I think you okay, I think you misinterpreted what I said. The Kubernetes enhancement issues that are there, the tracking issues for those. We want to drain the tracking issues that are not Kubernetes focused, but all keps should land in Kubernetes enhancements.
Okay, so you can still have keps for other repos, just not enhancement.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's
thank
just
you.
Yeah, that's just cleaning up the issues.
Okay, thanks. With that, we're going to move into the announcements section. So we have an election update. Who wants to give that one? George,
That's
Bob?
going to be me. Hi, everybody. Just 3 reminders for this week. The first things first is there is a file, and I put the URL in the notes there, called voters.md. In order to vote, you need to ensure that your GitHub handle is listed in this file. The way this file is generated is we look through dev stats, and if you have 50 or more contributions in any Kubernetes repo, you automatically get put in here. If you are not in here, but you feel that you've made enough contributions to be able to vote, the next link here in the notes, a SurveyMonkey form that you can fill out. Just tell us what you worked on, and we'll determine whether you can vote or not. And that's to take into account if you're contributing something that isn't exactly measured in GitHub. Maybe you're doing some PMing stuff, or a lot of the things I do, things like that. Also, reminder, you need to ensure that you're in this voters.md by September 11th. So if you haven't filled out the form, you need to do that this week and next week. And please check the list, because the same deadline is for whether you are going to run or not. So if you're thinking about running, the deadline is also September 11th. We've gotten 2 new people today who have submitted to run. So the next major dates are September 11th. I've posted all this information into the Kubernetes dev list. I'm just repeating it here. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, excellent. That's all I have. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, George. Do we have any other last minute announcements that didn't make their way onto the agenda this week? Okay, cool. With that, we will proceed to shout outs. So there was only one shout out in Slack this week, and that was from Antonio, shouting out to Ben the Elder and Catherine for all of their great work unblocking the queue for merge. So thank you to Ben and Catherine. Any other quick shout outs?
I want to shout out to George and all the ContribX folks that are putting the election together. There is a lot of nitty gritty details that go into that, things like the voters guide, pulling together those lists. So good job. Thanks for taking that on.
Yeah, thank you. That's a ton of work that happens behind the scenes that people don't notice. All right. With that, I think it's all right. Wait, sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
I was just going to do a quick shout out for, I'm the, wait, don't go yet. So quick shout out for really everyone in SIG release. The release team, I think, has been doing a phenomenal job. It's nice to see a lot of, so much of the improvement around process and automation that we've been doing, spinning up the release engineering team, everyone who's been working on that stuff, actually digging into some of the scary bits of like the tools that we use to actually release Kubernetes. Like seriously, all of you, phenomenal job. Keep it up.
All right. Thanks to the release team for awesome stuff. Any other quick shout outs or other things before we call it a day? Okay, thanks everybody for attending and have a great day. Bye.